Excellent. So you can't have a talk, well, I can't have a talk with a normal title. It's got to be something slightly ridiculous and bombastic. So hopefully you've got your attention, and I think it's going to lead on nicely from what the other guys just did. Click on the right thing. Yeah, so I'm Dan, and as I said at the beginning, I've recently started working at zeroheight as a design advocate, which basically means I'm just trying to find ways to listen and support the community all around design systems. So doing stuff like this, writing blog posts, one-on-one conversations, whatever it might be. It's really fun, I've got to be honest. And zeroheight itself is a design system documentation tool. So it syncs up with various design tools and your code all in one place, like a CMS, which is very cool, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here to tell you that design systems solve all your problems, because we know that. You just get one off the shelf, you plug it in, and everything's fine. Which means I can leave, because it's sorted. Really, it's three main areas that I want to talk about. And I'm used to pacing around a bit, so now I've got a standing desk. You're going to see me wobble all over the place. So we're talking about soaking up all the great stuff that's out there, finding your own sense of direction, and just recognizing that change isn't always easy. And you'll see all these amazing things out there. But any change is good, any forward momentum. We're kind of spoiled in the web community in a really, really good way. There's just so many people that are really, really clever in all kinds of aspects, from design, development, product, testing, infrastructure, any of this stuff, and everyone wants to share. It's just the best place to be. And so it's no different in design systems, where although the term has been around for a while and some of them are really quite mature, like very mature these days, there's still so much to learn. There's so much to challenge and twist around and think about different angles. So we're spoiled for choice with so much to absorb on a regular basis. And it always feels a little bit overwhelming, because what if someone has an amazing idea that you read about on a blog, like Nathan Curtis there with his naming tokens in design systems, and you look at what you've done and go, oh, maybe I've done it wrong. And it's hard, because what is the right way? It isn't an off-the-shelf thing where you just go, oh, I do it like that and it's all fine. That's not real. And when you start looking around and say, well, there are a lot of really, really nice design systems. Some of them have great brands, funny or intelligent names, aspirational names, and you go, I want that. I want our design system to have beautiful typography and a personality of its own, so people will just know that we know what we're doing. And it's still scrolling. There's quite a few of them. And this is by no means comprehensive, right? Everywhere you go, someone, some company of any size is going to say, ta-da, here's our amazing, beautiful design system. And on the whole, they all solve similar problems with different angles about what's different to them. Exactly like Kat and Jonna were talking about before us, where they had a set of problems and have their solution. It's still a design system. And now, how do I skip the video? Yes, they're all amazing. All of them. It's not easy making a design system, because it's not just designing some components. It's not just writing a bit of code. There's all of the people stuff that goes with it. There is so much that is invisible about design systems. And that's hard when you look at all these examples and go, oh, we could just be like material or carbon or any of them. You don't see a lot of it. So it's the same sort of thing as on Instagram, where you see someone's good side, you see the shiny bit, you see the bit of their lives that they want to share. In a way, a design system that's public facing especially is very much like that. You've got all these really well documented, well described components, all these great brand guidelines. You don't see the pain that went into it, which sometimes can happen. Those challenges where maybe you have some dead ends, maybe it's difficult to get buy-in, maybe you're just told not to do it. Maybe there's a whole load of failed attempts before the one that you see. So I think it's really important to understand that all of these great things are good for influence. You can look at them and go, that's really cool what they've done there, and then try and unpick it a bit. Most people are really good at blogging about the process, but the ugly side of it is really important to find. Did they have a really hard time selling it in and getting everyone to adopt it? Maybe they did. I'm sure it wasn't plain sailing. So it's trying to pick out of these great examples, which are all brilliant in their own way. What is it about them that you really like? What do you think might help you? So more than anything, it's trying to go, these are brilliant examples. And we have a sense that the design system will help us. But what is your North Star? And so you can easily point at one and go, yeah, we want that. It's not a great place to start. Why does a design system solve your problems? Is everyone clear about that? Why do this at all? It's a lot of investment. There's lots of people that maybe need to change what they do. There's a lot of internal stuff you might have to juggle, depending on the size of your organization. So being clear on what success looks like for you is really important. I mean, there's probably some metrics you can get your hands on. Maybe it's more qualitative and you just want to go, do people like it? How do we measure that? Are people actually using it? Then what is a meaningful metric? There are things you can go, okay, a good thing would be, let's just start with our buttons. It's a classic example. What does it take to make all our buttons use proper stuff from the design system? Maybe that's the first thing. Just ways of slicing it where you're quite clear on a short-term goal that feels attainable and that North Star, which is about your problems. So before diving into, right, we know we need a design system. We're going to take influence from all these amazing things. Just want to rattle through some of these areas that might not be too obvious. So when we say previous experiences, it might not always be at your current organization. It might not always be with design systems. It might be that people have tried a component library or something like that, and maybe they've had a bad experience. Maybe they found some dead ends themselves. It just makes sense in some way before committing to a solution to ask around and try and work out what expertise or experience do we have that maybe isn't obvious. Maybe from someone who works more on the infrastructure side, there's something they can really offer that you wouldn't have thought about if you're coming at the problem from the design angle. It's trying to get a rounded view of, does anyone have any experience, any encounters with a design system? Doing a retro if past versions have been tried. Just try and work out, well, why did they go wrong? Can we be honest about that? And leading on to that is the fundamental thing. Design systems are a people problem. The components can go through. We know we've got talented designers, we've got talented developers. But all of this stuff around communication and collaboration is all people stuff. We need to be clear on it doesn't happen. And it's not just the people designing and coding it. It's all of that area around it, the immediate team. Maybe it's a huge enterprise place and there's a multinational organization structure. So before even writing a line of code, do we have an idea of what that looks like? Who needs to be involved? Who needs to be aware? Who do we think might have a fair challenge or a problem with it? That helps us give some sense of reality to the project before it exists. Who might be needing a bit of persuasion? Who might be super excited about it and be a great advocate for you? It's trying to get a rough idea of where are the challenges, Is this going to be an easy sell? Is there a department that needs to be involved that isn't obvious? All of that kind of leads to governance, which is a term you often hear around design systems. And it's kind of a catch-all sometimes. So a colleague of mine wrote a great blog post about it. The short thing is, whatever your structure, maybe it's an ad hoc team, maybe you've got a dedicated team, maybe it's federalized all across product teams. How do you make decisions? And that might be a change of tech or design. It might be down to someone's contributed something. How do you know it's done in the right way? How can you review it? And so as things change, how does that governance process work? How can you communicate it to everyone? So governance and people are very much the same sort of thing. It's easy to kind of forget about this stuff and jump straight into the details. So it's kind of interesting when you talk to lots of people about what they think a design system is, because sometimes it can be maybe someone's actually created a UI kit in Figma and they go, here's my design system. And in a way, they're not wrong. Although you might say it's a UI kit, that might be the scope of their design system given their context. It might be that you say, all right, we're a design-led organization. And so our design tool with some documentation, that's the scope of our design system. Maybe there's just loads and loads of engineering teams all using different tech, and you have to deliberately scope it. That's fine, as long as it's clear that's what you mean by design system. And ideally, very much like the demo earlier, it should be seamless. So from problem space through design, through documentation, through code, it's the same thing. And we're really clear on the problems that all this stuff solves. So we lean into workflow a little bit. So this was for an article I wrote about workflow. So I don't expect this slide to make sense. But the other one there might be an oversimplification of a product development process where we've got a problem space, the product owner works with a designer, maybe a BA, whatever your configuration is, and you go through an iterative design, development, test, iterate kind of cycle, and eventually you end up with a live product. So how might you factor in the impact of a design system? What if you, I don't know, you've got a new problem to solve and 90% of it is solved by the design system, but that 10% needs something new. What do you do? That relates back to governance, where you're saying, okay, so I'm a person in a product team and I've noticed a new thing. How do we do that? Do I just make it? Do I tell somebody? Is there a workflow I need to do myself? And just, through a few Post-its or stickies, starts to unpick some of that of what is the impact for an individual on our particular flavor of design system. And likewise at the bottom there with the bug reports, triaging the issues and that kind of thing. That takes time. Who's going to do it? Because you'd hope that over time, the design system and the components would mature, but there's always going to be a snag or something at some point. So we come to baby steps. You've got all of this kind of North Star, the goals, the rough idea of we want to try and get here, and we're clear on the problems that we're solving for us. So how do you do it? And I think part of it is when talking about the workflow and the governance, all of that stuff, it's easy when it's greenfield in some ways, because at least you can go, okay, well, we'll have a workshop, we'll get some people together. It's still possible when you already have a design system. It can be harder. But spending that time thinking about the people bit, the governance, the workflow, it's never too late. And you never know what it's going to throw up. You might find that there's workflow improvements, trying to open that circle around it so more people are aware. Maybe you change your comms strategy. There's loads you can learn. And so change with intent is a really powerful thing. It doesn't have to be huge steps, as long as they're a positive forward movement. Excuse me. And so with design tokens, if you're not familiar with it, they're essentially design decisions stored in JSON files. And so with this example here, I'm using the Figma tokens plugin. If you think design tokens might be interesting, it doesn't mean you have to do a whole reorganization, a whole restructure. But if you do it with intent and think, well, let's try it. How much do we need to do to validate the approach? And so if you use something like the variables you saw before, you can get that from tokens, from design tokens into those variables. So it might just be changing the workflow. How do we get from a choice in design through into the variables that are React or whatever used to consume? So yeah, obviously I'm going to use zeroheight, but you might start off with no real components and to say, okay, we've got a tool for documentation. You can start by talking about the workflow and the governance stuff right away. Whatever you use for documentation, it's just a matter of capturing, why are we having a design system anyway? Are we clear on that? Who needs to be involved? That starts to become, it could be the source of truth, but certainly the single destination where everyone knows, go to this address, you'll see exactly what's in the design system. You can read about brand, the design system project, you can see the code as well as the design. And it starts that setting of expectations, I think. So there is no utopian dream. It's just one of those things where you see a new shiny and you think, we should have that. But it's trying to find that balance between what are your problems? How far do you need to go with solving them? And how much influence can you take from someone that's got a really mature system that's probably been through a lot of pain, and try and be quite clear on where do you really need to get to? It might not be a big shiny thing. It might be solving your problems in a way that's just right for you. That's all I've got for you. I know it's a lot of rambling, but feel free to follow up on Twitter if you want to, or in the chat. And yeah, thanks for having me.